In the modern world, sleep has become a negotiation with a machine that lives inside your skull. You can do everything right. Take magnesium, set alarms, buy blackout curtains, track your score, avoid caffeine, meditate, stretch, and still find yourself staring into the ceiling like it's an enemy. The room is quiet. The bed is soft. The world is technically safe, and yet your body refuses to cross the threshold. That's the paradox we live in now. We have more comfort than any civilization in history, and we sleep like we're under siege. It's easy to assume this is a personal failure, that something is wrong with you, that you're missing the secret trick everyone else found. But the truth is uglier and simpler. You are a creature built for an ancient world, trying to rest inside a modern one. For most of human history, sleep wasn't a lifestyle choice. It wasn't a product, it wasn't a performance. Sleep was a consequence. The day ended, darkness arrived, and the body did what bodies do when they're allowed to follow the rhythm they were made for. The past is not a golden age of comfort. Ancient life was hard and sometimes cruel. People lived with hunger, disease, war, cold, and grief close enough to touch. And yet, within that hardship, they often had something we've misplaced. A world that naturally produced sleep. Not perfect sleep. Not uninterrupted 8-hour luxury every night. But sleep that was woven into the structure of daily life instead of fought for in isolation. Sleep that didn't require apps and white noise machines and 1,000 rules. Sleep that arrived because the whole day pointed toward it. That is what this story is about. Not a fantasy of ancient people drifting into effortless bliss while we suffer. But the strange possibility that certain ancient conditions, light, darkness, movement, meal timing, materials, ritual, community, created deeper, more restorative rest than the modern world typically allows, and that we can reclaim some of those conditions without abandoning modern life. Because archaeology doesn't just reveal weapons and temples, it reveals bedrooms, it reveals sleeping platforms and headrests and woven mats, it reveals soot patterns from ancient lamps and the way homes were built to catch or block light. It reveals diet through residue in pottery and remnants in graves. It reveals labour in bones, spines and joints shaped by movement. It reveals the spiritual dimension of sleep in inscriptions, offerings and temple architecture designed around dream healing. The deeper you look, the more you realise that ancient sleep wasn't an accident. It was supported by the world itself. Modern sleep is supported by almost nothing. Modern sleep is something you're expected to produce inside a schedule that ignores biology. You work late under artificial light, eat late because the day stole your time, stare into screens that flood your brain with simulated daylight, and then you blame your nervous system when it refuses to shut down. You do not need more discipline. You need a different environment. And this is where the ancient world becomes unsettlingly relevant, because it shows us what we've traded away without noticing. We traded darkness for convenience. We traded rhythmic days for flexible ones. We traded movement for efficiency. We traded communal safety for private isolation. We traded natural tiredness for digital exhaustion. We traded something invisible and paid for it with sleep. The ancients did not optimize rest the way we do because they didn't have to. They lived in a system that made rest possible. Their nights were darker, their days were more physical. Their meals were earlier. Their social worlds were closer. Their beliefs often treated sleep as meaningful rather than wasted time. And when sleep is meaningful, you approach it differently. You don't attack it like a task. You enter it like a place. That alone changes everything. So as we move through this journey, keep one image in mind. You are not trying to become ancient. You are trying to remember what your body is. A creature of sun and shadow. A creature whose nervous system calibrates through rhythm. A creature that sleeps best when life has a clear ending and the night is allowed to be night. Because the ancients didn't have better willpower than you. They didn't have better genes. They had a world that trained sleep into them, and the world you live in now trains sleeplessness. The good news is that training can be reversed, but first we have to return to the oldest ruler of human life, the one every ancient civilization obeyed without argument. The sun. In ancient life, the sun wasn't just light, it was law. The moment it rose, the world woke with it. Not because people loved mornings, but because the day belonged to daylight. Work demanded visibility. Travel demanded safety. Household tasks demanded light. The marketplace demanded crowds before darkness scattered them again. So the sun shaped behaviour long before anyone knew what a circadian rhythm was. Your modern day begins with an alarm in a dark room. You wake to a small rectangle of cold light inches from your face. Your eyes receive a burst of artificial brightness that doesn't match the sky. You might not see true daylight for hours. You might spend your entire day under a ceiling that never changes. Your body, which evolved to read the world through light, is forced to guess what time it is. And when the body guesses, it often guesses wrong. Ancient people didn't guess. Their biology was anchored by a daily certainty. Morning light, midday brightness, evening dimness, night darkness. The sun set the internal clock the way a drummer sets the tempo for marching feet. Every day, without exception, the world told the brain exactly when to be awake and exactly when to descend. That descent mattered. In the ancient home, light was precious. Even in wealthy households with lamps and oil, illumination was not an endless flood. It was localized, warm and limited. Shadows were everywhere. Darkness remained the dominant force. And this matters because the human brain is not designed to sleep in a world that stays bright. Nighttime darkness is a biochemical signal. It tells the brain to shift from vigilance to repair. It allows the body's night chemistry to rise and do its work. Modern light at night, especially bright, cool light, interrupts that signal. It tells your ancient brain that the sun never set, that the hunt continues, that the tribe must remain alert. Ancient people experienced darkness the way modern people rarely do, as a full-body environment. Not just dim, but truly dark. A darkness where stars mattered. A darkness where the fire was a small island, not a replacement sun. So they lived with a clean contrast between day and night. Modern humans live in a blurred twilight that never ends. And inside that blur, sleep becomes fragile. Look at ancient architecture, and you see how seriously light and darkness were taken, even when people weren't consciously thinking in scientific terms. Homes in many climates were designed to manage heat and light through thick walls, courtyards, shaded spaces and small openings. Brightness belonged to the day. Night belonged to darkness. You could sit by a lamp, yes, but it wasn't the same kind of light that turns your brain into morning. A flame is warm, shifting and low. It flickers like the natural world. It doesn't pin your nervous system to attention the way modern screens do. It doesn't glare from above like an artificial sky. It lives at human scale. This is why the ancient night often prepared sleep rather than sabotaging it. The light that existed after sunset was softer and more honest. It told the body, we are in the evening now. We are closing. And the closing began early. Twilight mattered. Dusk mattered. The slow dimming of the world gave the nervous system time to descend. You didn't slam from bright day into bed. You passed through a long corridor of lowering light. Modern people, by contrast, often spend the evening in high brightness environments, overhead lights, televisions, phones, then try to drop into sleep instantly. The brain doesn't work like that. The brain needs transition. Ancient life provided it automatically. And then there's the morning. Ancient people received daylight early and often. Even if they lived in dense cities, even if their homes were shadowed, they were outside. They moved through open air. They encountered the sky. Their eyes absorbed morning brightness that told the brain, with absolute clarity, this is daytime. That morning signal is one of the strongest anchors for healthy sleep. It sets the internal clock. It shapes when the body will feel sleepy later. It determines how easily you can fall asleep when night arrives. Modern life weakens that anchor. We commute in boxes, we work indoors, we stare at screens. We see daylight through glass and call it enough. Your brain does not agree. So if you want to borrow an ancient advantage, it begins here. Treat light as the most powerful sleep tool you own. Not supplements, not trackers. Light. Morning brightness to set the day. Evening dimness to begin the descent. Night darkness to allow deep sleep chemistry to rise. In the ancient world, this was not a protocol. It was reality. And the most brutal modern truth is that you cannot out-hack a world that keeps telling your brain it's daytime. But you can reclaim a small piece of ancient law inside your home. You can make night darker. You can make evenings softer. You can seek morning light like it matters, because it does. The sun was king in ancient life, and your body still lives under that monarchy, even if your schedule pretends otherwise. But there is another ancient secret that goes even deeper, because it doesn't just change when you sleep, it changes what sleep even is. The strangest part is how quickly your body remembers. 1 or 2 nights of dimmer evenings, 1 or 2 mornings with real daylight in your eyes, and something in you loosens, like a lock that was never meant to be forced. You start feeling sleepy at a normal hour again, not because you pushed yourself, but because the world finally stopped lying to your brain. This is what ancient people had by default, a day that taught the nervous system when to rise and when to fall. And once you fall into that rhythm, you start noticing something else, something modern life erased so completely we forgot it existed. Sleep doesn't have to be one solid block. It can have tides. The modern world treats sleep as a single block, one long blackout. 8 hours, uninterrupted, like a sealed coffin of rest. But if you step backward far enough, you start hearing a strange echo across cultures and centuries. A different pattern. A pattern that feels almost forbidden to modern people, because it sounds like failure. The 2 sleeps. Imagine this. You lie down after dusk, tired in a way that feels clean. You fall asleep quickly, not because you forced it, but because the day made it inevitable. Hours pass. Then, sometime in the heart of night, you wake. Not in panic, not because something is wrong. You wake the way a tide turns, your eyes open into darkness. The fire is embers, the house is quiet. Outside, the world is still. You are awake, but not alert. Your mind is calm, drifting. You don't reach for a screen, you don't check the time. You don't think, oh no, insomnia. You simply exist in the midnight space. For a while you pray, or you talk softly, or you make love, or you sit in silence with the kind of thoughts that only come when the world is asleep. Then, without struggle, you return to bed and fall into a second sleep until dawn. This pattern appears again and again in historical references from later periods, and it aligns eerily well with what sleep researchers have observed. Human sleep is not necessarily designed for one unbroken block under artificial conditions. In environments with natural light cycles and long winter nights, the body can drift naturally into biphasic sleep. 2 segments with a calm waking interval. The modern world often interprets that interval as a problem. The ancient world often treated it as normal. This is not to claim every ancient person slept in 2 neat blocks every night. Life is messier than that. But the existence of first sleep and second sleep as a recognizable idea suggests something profound. The modern expectation of one perfect, uninterrupted block may itself create anxiety, and anxiety is a predator that feeds on bedtime. When you believe waking at night is failure, you bring fear into the moment your eyes open. Fear activates the nervous system. Activation pushes sleep away. Then the very thing that could have been a calm interval becomes modern insomnia. Ancient people were spared that trap because they didn't carry the same expectation. And in a world without bright night stimulation, that waking interval could remain soft. Darkness didn't demand alertness. There was no glowing portal to the day, no email, no social media, no news, no artificial sunrise, just night. So the mind could float. What did people do in that midnight gap? The evidence varies by culture and era, but the theme is consistent. Quiet activities, prayer, reflection, intimacy, simple tasks, a gentle tending of the fire, a walk outside to look at stars, a moment of stillness where the mind could process life without being dragged into modern stimulation. It's not hard to see how that could improve sleep overall. You get deep rest early in the night. You wake naturally, briefly. Then you return to sleep for another segment, often rich, in dreaming. Modern people often lose both. They miss the deep first plunge because their evenings are too bright and too stimulated. They miss the calm interval because they interpret waking as disaster. They miss the second sleep because the nervous system is now activated and refusing to settle. So the ancient pattern, whether practiced consciously or not, becomes a kind of lost mercy, permission to wake without fear. This is one of the most powerful psychological reframes you can borrow. If you wake at night, the first question is not, what's wrong with me? The first question is, can I make this softer? Can you keep the room dark? Can you avoid bright screens? Can you breathe slowly and treat the moment as normal rather than catastrophic? Can you allow the nervous system to remain in the night instead of launching it into day? Because the difference between a calm midnight waking and insomnia is often not time. It's fear. Ancient people lived with many fears, but they didn't have the modern fear of not sleeping correctly. They didn't carry a performance metric into bed. They didn't wake up thinking about productivity and biohacks and sleep scores. They woke up and simply lived in the night for a while, and then they returned. This is why the two sleeps idea haunts modern readers when they first encounter it. It suggests that some of what we call insomnia might be a mismatch between biology and expectation, that our bodies may sometimes be doing something ancient and normal, and we panic it into a problem. The ancients didn't have the modern sleep story, so the body could follow its own design. And this leads to a bigger question. If sleep was structured differently, if night was darker, if waking was softer, what did the ancients believe sleep actually was? Not just rest, something more. Because in many ancient cultures, sleep was not the end of consciousness. It was a doorway, and doorways can be built. That doorway wasn't only a metaphor, it was also physical. It was built into the way ancient people shaped their sleeping world. Wood frames that lifted bodies into cooler air, woven supports that flexed instead of collapsing, layers of wool and linen and straw that breathed, and simple head supports that kept the neck aligned rather than sinking forward. Before dreams could heal, the body had to be able to let go, and that means we have to step into the real, tangible place where the ancient night actually happened. The bed. You have been told your whole life that the bed is a modern triumph, that everything before foam and springs was suffering, that our ancestors slept on misery and woke up broken. But archaeology keeps whispering a different story, not because the ancient world was comfortable, but because it was honest about the body. When you strip away marketing and look at what people actually lay on, you start seeing a pattern. Ancient sleep surfaces were built from materials that breathed, shifted, and responded to human weight the way living matter does. They were not perfect, they were not uniform, yet they often worked with the body instead of trapping it. Begin in Egypt, where the desert teaches its own physics. A cool night can arrive fast, even after a day that felt like fire. The ancient answer wasn't a sealed, heat-holding mattress. It was elevation and airflow. Beds raised off the floor, frames that let air move beneath the sleeper, surfaces made from woven fibres, and those famous headrests carved from wood, stone, or glazed clay. The headrest looks cruel to modern eyes, a hard curve where we expect plush. But it was a tool. It supported the neck, protected elaborate hair and head coverings, and kept the face away from crawling insects in a world where the night had teeth. The shape matters. Many headrests cradle the base of the skull and the curve of the neck, encouraging a posture that keeps the airway open and the spine long. Modern mahogany neat. Pillows often push the head forward, narrowing the throat and forcing the neck into a bent compromise. Ancient designs, in their stark simplicity, sometimes did the opposite. They reminded the body to stack itself. Comfort, in the ancient sense, was not always cushion. It was the relief of not being twisted for hours. Move forward to Rome, and you find the lectus, the bed couch that blurs sleeping and living into one piece of furniture. Romans reclined to eat, reclined to talk, reclined to rest. Their posture culture was different, and so was their bedding. The frame was solid, but the surface was layered. Webbing, straps, or woven supports beneath, then mattresses stuffed with whatever the household could afford. Straw for the poor, wool for the stable middle, feathers for the wealthy. Even the simplest stuffing had a hidden advantage. It was breathable, adjustable, and easy to refresh. That matters more than it sounds. Modern mattresses can be too loyal. They memorize you. They form a permanent cradle that holds you in the same posture for hours. If that posture is slightly wrong, the mattress doesn't correct it. It reinforces it. Ancient bedding, by contrast, tended to require micro-adjustments. You shifted, the stuffing shifted, and the body subtly recalibrated. Movement was not an enemy of sleep. It was part of it. Small changes in position can prevent numbness, ease joints, and keep blood flowing without waking you fully. Then there are the raised platforms found across cultures, simple wooden planks, packed earth benches, stone ledges, built-in sleeping shelves along walls. In cold climates, elevation kept bodies away from damp floors and drafts. In hot climates, it encouraged airflow. In communal spaces, platforms created order, a designated boundary between day and night, work and rest. A platform is not merely a place to lie down, it is a declaration that sleep has a location, and location shapes the nervous system. When the body learns, night after night, that this surface is where the day ends, it starts descending faster. Now look closely at the materials: linen, wool, animal skins, straw, reeds. These are not just historical curiosities, they are thermoregulators. Linen breathes and wicks moisture, keeping the body cooler when heat builds. Wool insulates even when damp, buffers temperature swings, and can hold warmth without sealing in sweat. Animal skins provide dense insulation and wind protection, especially on floors or platforms in drafty rooms. Straw and reeds create loft and ventilation, trapping air in small pockets while letting humidity escape. Modern bedding often does the opposite. Dense synthetic foams and tight weaves can trap heat, hold humidity, and create a microclimate that turns the body into a slow cooker. And when the body overheats, sleep becomes shallow. The brain won't allow deep surrender when the skin is too warm. Ancient people didn't speak in those terms, but they felt the truth. Their materials were chosen from what worked in the season, not what sounded premium. Even the pillow tells a story. Many ancient cultures didn't elevate the head the way we do. Some used headrests, some used rolled cloth, folded garments, or nothing at all. That absence may sound primitive, but it often encourages back or side positions that keep the spine neutral. A high pillow can force the neck into flexion and tighten the shoulders. A low support can let the head and neck relax into a straighter line. And when you see ancient sleeping postures in art, bodies turned slightly, knees bent, arms tucked in, you're seeing positions that reduce strain and conserve warmth without demanding a perfectly engineered mattress. There is another advantage hidden in plain sight: firmness. Many ancient surfaces were firmer than modern beds. Firmness is not comfort by itself, but it can prevent the pelvis from sinking too deep, which reduces strain on the lower back. On an overly soft surface, the hips drop, the spine twists, and the muscles work all night to protect you. You wake up sore and blame yourself when the bed has been quietly sabotaging alignment for hours. A firmer surface paired with breathable layers can support the skeleton so the muscles finally stop guarding. This may be why, despite brutal labour and hard lives, ancient people sometimes avoided the specific modern pattern of sleep-related discomfort. The night injuries of softness: neck kinked forward, shoulders rounded, lower back arched into stress. Their problems were different. Their bodies were worn by work, yes, but their sleep surfaces didn't always trap them in the same warped posture for years. They also changed bedding with the seasons, adding skins in winter, lightening to linen in summer, renewing straw and reeds when they flattened, and airing fabrics in sun and wind. And there is a quieter detail that matters: smell. Natural fibres carry the scent of the world: wool, wood, smoke, clean sun. Ancient bedrooms were not perfumed laboratories, but many households used plants and resins for freshness, insects, and comfort. The mind ties scent to safety faster than it ties it to logic. A familiar smell in the sleeping place becomes a signal: the night has begun, and you are where you belong. None of this is to claim ancient beds were paradise. Parasites existed, cold existed, crowding existed, but the physical logic of their bedding was often sound: breathe, regulate, align, adapt. And that logic is precisely what modern sleepers are trying to buy back with cooling gels, ergonomic pillows, and temperature-controlled mattresses. The irony is that the ancients reached many of these principles without theory, guided by weather, labour, and the simple demand to rest well. So when you think of the ancient bed, don't picture suffering on a rock. Picture a system built from what the earth provided, refined by trial, shaped by seasons, and corrected by experience. Picture a frame that lifts you into moving air, a surface that shifts under you instead of swallowing you, fibres that wick and insulate without sealing, a head support that aligns rather than inflates, an environment that tells your body, in 100 quiet ways, you can let go now. Because the bed is never just a bed, it is the architecture of the night. And long before we invented sleep products, ancient people were already building sleep spaces that spoke the body's oldest language: cool, dark, supported, and free to move. The modern bedroom is a fortress, a closed door, a private kingdom. One body, one mattress, one mind sealed inside its own skull. We call it peace. We call it independence. We call it healthy boundaries. And then we lie there alone in perfect silence, staring into the dark, wondering why sleep feels like a negotiation with something that doesn't trust us. For most of human history, that scene would have felt strange, almost unnatural, not because ancient people didn't value privacy, but because sleep was never just a personal hobby. Sleep was survival. And survival, for a social species, has always been communal. The private bedroom is not ancient tradition. It is a modern invention scaled into a cultural obsession. Step back into the ancient world, and you find sleeping arrangements that look messy by modern standards, but coherent by biological ones. Households shared space, families clustered, apprentices slept near masters, servants slept where they were needed, children slept close because that's where warmth and safety were. In cramped urban living, there simply wasn't room for everyone to vanish into separate chambers. And even where wealth allowed more rooms, the night still tended to gather people rather than scatter them. Take a Roman insula, those crowded apartment buildings where ordinary city life stacked itself vertically. Space was tight, walls were thin, rooms were multi-purpose. You didn't have a dedicated sleep sanctuary engineered for silence. You had a living space that transformed when darkness arrived. People slept where they could, often in proximity, because proximity was practical. If there was a fire, you noticed. If there was trouble, you heard it. If someone became ill, they weren't isolated behind a door while fever did its work unnoticed. The Greek household too was not designed around the modern idea that sleep should be solitary and perfectly controlled. Homes were organised around shared courtyards and common rooms, spaces that served the household as a unit. Privacy existed, but it wasn't the default setting for nightly rest. The night belonged to the family, to the household, to the people who depended on each other. Then the medieval hall, the long room where a lord's household ate, argued, hosted, planned, and at night slept. In many places and periods, sleeping in the hall was ordinary, not romantic, not cosy in the modern sense, but normal. Bodies lined, the edges, fires banked low, dogs shifted in the shadows. The building itself became a sheltering organism, and the people inside it became a herd. Modern readers often react with horror. No privacy, no quiet, no personal space. But the ancient nervous system didn't interpret it that way, because the human body does not sleep best when it is alone. It sleeps best when it feels safe. And safety is not an idea. Safety is a physiological state. Your nervous system is a watchman. It scans for threat even when you want it to stop. And one of the most powerful signals that threat is lower is the presence of trusted others. Not strangers, not chaos. Trusted bodies, familiar voices, the subtle proof that you are not keeping watch alone. This is why, even now, many people sleep better in a house with someone else, without understanding why. Not because they're weak, not because they can't be independent, but because the brain deep down still thinks like an ancient animal. Alone, in the dark it listens harder. With others nearby it relaxes. Communal sleep also solved problems modern people try to solve with technology. Temperature, for one. Bodies produce heat. Shared sleeping spaces hold warmth. In cold climates, the difference between sleeping alone and sleeping near others could be the difference between rest and shivering vigilance. You can't fall into deep sleep when your body is fighting cold stress. The ancients didn't need heated blankets to understand this. They understood it the way you understand it. When winter bites, you cluster, you conserve, you survive. Even in milder climates, communal sleeping created a stable microclimate. A room with several sleepers has different air movement, different warmth pockets, different thermal stability than a solitary body in a large, cool space. The ancient night often relied on simple physics. Fewer drafts, more shared warmth, less time spent cold and awake. Security was the second advantage. In a world with fewer locks, fewer streetlights, and more real dangers, sleeping alone could be risky. A group hears more. A group responds faster. A group creates deterrence by simple presence. Even if the danger was not a predator at the door but a fire, a collapse, a sudden illness, communal sleeping meant quicker awareness, quicker help, quicker survival. But the deepest advantage was psychological, and it's the one modern people underestimate the most: belonging. Night is when the mind becomes vulnerable. In darkness, the brain replays fear. It runs simulations. It scans memory. It whispers worst-case futures. That tendency isn't modern. It's ancient. The difference is that ancient people often faced the night with the quiet reinforcement of others near them. They weren't always comforted by words. Sometimes it was just the sound of breathing, the knowledge that someone else was there, the low murmur of a presence that told the nervous system, you are not alone in the dark. Modern sleep culture teaches the opposite. It teaches that the ideal sleeper is alone, perfectly quiet, perfectly controlled, perfectly private. And for some people that truly is best, but for many others that ideal becomes a trap. They isolate themselves in silence and then wonder why the mind gets louder. Silence is not always soothing. Sometimes silence is where the watchman begins pacing. This is where modern research becomes uncomfortable, because it keeps brushing against ancient truths. Studies on social connection and stress physiology repeatedly suggest that close relationships buffer stress responses. Co-sleeping research, especially around infants and families, has long debated risks and benefits, but one theme is consistent: proximity can regulate. The presence of a trusted body can reduce physiological arousal and support a calmer nervous system. Even among adults, many people report sleeping more easily with a partner they feel safe with, not because the partner is quiet, but because the partner is familiar. It isn't the noise that matters, it's the meaning. Ancient people lived in a world where meaning was communal by default. You were not a solitary unit floating through life. You were a part of a household, a group, a lineage. Even when you wanted privacy, you still lived inside a net. Modern people often live outside that net. And then we try to fix the resulting nervous system loneliness with products: white noise, weighted blankets, sleep stories, breathing apps. We simulate the cues of communal safety because communal safety itself is missing. Think of the irony. The weighted blanket is, in a way, a manufactured substitute for the pressure and warmth of another body. White noise is a manufactured substitute for the low ambient sound of a living household. Sleep stories are a manufactured substitute for the soothing voice in the dark. We are rebuilding the communal night with machines because we no longer trust the old. Solution: each other. Of course, ancient communal sleep had disadvantages. Crowding meant more disturbance. Illness could spread. People had less control over noise and movement. Privacy was limited, and not all proximity was safe. History is full of households where closeness meant vulnerability for the powerless. But when communal sleeping involved trusted people, family, kin, allies, it created something modern architecture often erases: a nervous system that doesn't have to stand guard alone. That might be why so many modern insomniacs describe a strange pattern. They sleep best when travelling with others, sleeping in a shared house, staying with family, sharing a room, then sleep worse once they return to their private fortress. They assume it's the routine disruption. Sometimes it's the opposite. Sometimes the disruption is a return to solitude. So what do we do with this knowledge without abandoning modern values? We don't have to resurrect the medieval hall. We don't have to cram families into one room, but we can stop pretending that the private bedroom is the only correct way to sleep. We can recognise that the brain evolved to rest inside social safety. You can borrow the ancient advantage in small ways: a pet sleeping nearby, a partner's presence, a child's room close enough that you can hear them without being jolted into fear, a bedtime routine that includes connection rather than isolation, talking, laughter, a quiet moment that tells the nervous system the tribe is intact. Even the way you think about night matters. If you treat sleep as solitary performance, you will carry pressure into it. If you treat sleep as a shared human state, something your ancestors entered among others for thousands of years, you may feel less alone when your eyes open at 2 a.m. You may stop interpreting wakefulness as a personal failure and start interpreting it as an old, normal moment in the dark. But the real question remains, and it's the one modern people don't like to ask because it threatens a sacred belief. Has our pursuit of privacy cost us quality sleep? And if that question makes you uncomfortable, it should. because it suggests that insomnia isn't always a chemical defect. Sometimes it's a social wound. Sometimes the body stays half awake because it senses in some ancient corner of itself that it's keeping watch alone. We built private rooms and called it progress, but the nervous system still measures safety the old way. By warmth, by proximity, by the quiet proof that the tribe is intact. Yet even safety isn't enough if the body is still running daylight inside the night. Because there is another ancient boundary most of us broke without noticing: what we eat and when we stop. Night in the ancient world did not begin at bedtime. It began at the last bite. In your life now, eating has no boundary. Food appears under bright light at any hour, delivered like a modern miracle. You can eat, finish a heavy meal at midnight, wash it down with sugar and stimulation, and then look at your body as if it's defective when it refuses to fall asleep. But the body isn't confused. It's responding to a signal as old as fire. Digestion means the day is still active. Ancient people rarely had the luxury of treating night like an extension of afternoon. Not because they were disciplined, but because the world enforced limits. Cooking required fuel, fuel required labour, light required oil, oil required wealth. Kitchens were heat and smoke and effort. Even in cities, even in wealthy homes, the night did not invite endless eating for most people most days. There were feasts, yes, ritual nights where the wealthy could turn darkness into spectacle. But daily life tended toward an earlier ending. And that early ending matters because sleep is not a mood. Sleep is a state your body enters only when multiple systems agree that it is safe to power down. Digestion is one of those systems. When you eat, you ignite a controlled fire inside the body. Blood shifts toward the gut. Temperature rises, metabolism turns loud. Hormones respond. The nervous system stays a little more alert because something important is happening. Fuel is being processed. Nutrients are being sorted, the body is still doing day work. In the ancient rhythm, food usually arrived earlier, and then there was a long, quiet stretch between the last meal and sleep. That stretch created a metabolic dusk. The stomach softened. The core temperature could begin its natural drop. Blood sugar could settle rather than spike and crash. The body could stop negotiating with the world and turn toward repair. It's not romantic, it's mechanical. And the mechanics make dreams possible. Because dreams don't thrive in chaos. The architecture of restorative sleep, the deeper stages, the quiet hormonal work, the smooth cycling into dreaming, depends on stability. If your gut is struggling, your sleep becomes lighter. If your blood sugar is volatile, your brain stays watchful. If your body is too warm, it resists deep surrender. Ancient meal timing often reduced all of that without trying. But timing was only half the secret. The other half was what they ate. Ancient diets varied across regions, class and season. But there's a theme that repeats like a drumbeat. Their food was less engineered, less stripped, less designed to be eaten endlessly. It came from fields and animals and rivers. It had structure. It asked your body to work, but it didn't provoke it the way modern, ultra-processed foods do. And that difference changes the night. Whole grains are a good example. In many ancient societies, daily calories came from grains that still carried their complexity: barley, emmer, rye, oats, millet. These grains digest more slowly than refined flour and sugar. They feed you without whipping your metabolism into a storm. They create a steadier, quieter energy curve across the evening. That matters for sleep, because the body dislikes surprises at night. A stable fuel source means fewer midnight jolts. Fermented dairy is another quiet powerhouse. In parts of the ancient world where animals were kept for milk, fermentation wasn't a trendy health experiment. It was preservation. Milk spoiled quickly, so people turned it into something that lasted. Tangy, thick, nourishing forms of curds and yogurts and cultured drinks. Fermentation changes milk. It breaks components down, makes it gentler for many stomachs, and provides a calming sense of satiety that doesn't sit like a stone. A stomach that isn't fighting is a nervous system that can loosen. Then there's fish, so common in coastal and river cultures that we forget how important it was. Fish is nutrient-dense without the heaviness of large, late meat meals. It provides a kind of nourishment that satisfies without overheating the system. In many ancient communities, fish was eaten fresh when possible, or preserved when not. often paired with simple grains and herbs. You can feel how different that is from modern night eating. Large, rich, late meals with sugar and stimulants woven through them. And herbs, always herbs, not only as medicine, but as habit. Ancient kitchens were pharmacological spaces without anyone calling them that. Herbs were used for digestion, for calm, for warmth, for fragrance, for preservation. Some were chosen because they soothed the stomach, and a soothed stomach makes sleep easier. Some were chosen because their scent itself signaled the end of the day. A bitter leaf, a fragrant seed, an infusion warm in the hands after sunset. These are cues. The brain learns cues faster than it learns rules. Modern people often chase sleep by force. Ancient people often drifted toward it by pattern. That's the real power of meal timing and ancient food culture. It wasn't just nutrition. It was a daily ritual of closing. When you eat earlier, you don't just help digestion, you create a psychological boundary. You tell your body, the day's hunting is finished, the fire can bank, the world can dim. That boundary reduces bedtime anxiety because it turns night into a known destination rather than a sudden cliff. And if you want the most underrated ancient sleep tool of all, it's this: fermentation. Fermentation is the art of letting time do the work. You create conditions, then you step back. You don't rush it. You don't force it. You allow transformation to happen in darkness, quietly. That is exactly what sleep is. The ancient world lived among slow transformations: dough rising, milk thickening, vegetables turning sour and stable, fish curing, grain becoming drink. These were daily reminders that the most powerful changes in the human world happen when you stop interfering. When you prepare, then release. Modern life trains the opposite: constant input, constant stimulation, constant control. Even at night, we are managing, optimizing, checking. And then we wonder why sleep, the great transformation, won't arrive. Ancient people were surrounded by processes that taught surrender. Their food culture didn't just feed the body, it trained the mind for the night. Now bring this back to the modern world without romance. What can you steal from the ancients without pretending you live in a clay house by torchlight? Start with the earlier ending. Not perfection, just an earlier boundary most nights. Give your body a clear gap between the last meal and sleep. Let digestion finish its work before you ask the brain to descend. If your nights are restless, late eating is one of the simplest levers you can pull. Then look at the texture of your food. Less late sugar, less processed intensity, more slow foods that don't spike and crash, more simple pairings that satisfy without inflaming, more warmth and softness in the evening instead of stimulation disguised as comfort. And consider the ritual. The ancients didn't treat the last meal as an afterthought, squeezed between screens. It was a marker, a moment that closed the day. You don't need a feast, you need a signal, a repeatable cue that tells the nervous system, we are done now. Because sleep isn't only about what you remove, it's about what you replace. Replace the modern pattern of late fuel and bright stimulation with something older, an earlier meal, a quieter evening, a body that cools, a stomach that rests, a mind that stops scanning for the next input. Then the night changes, not instantly, not magically, but mechanically, patiently. The way fermentation changes milk. And one evening, you'll notice something small that feels like a miracle. You lie down and your body doesn't argue as much. Your dreams arrive with less noise. Your sleep feels like it has depth again, not because you hacked it, but because you finally stopped feeding the day into the night. In the ancient world, sleep was not something you chased at the end of the day. Sleep chased you. Not in the soft, romantic way modern people imagine, but in the blunt way the body behaves when it has been used, when muscles have worked for hours, when joints have carried weight, when lungs have pulled cold air and warm air, and dust and smoke and morning fog, when the sun has watched you move all day like a witness that doesn't blink. That kind of tiredness is different from what most modern people call tired. Modern tiredness is often mental, an exhaustion made of notifications, deadlines, and invisible stress. You can finish a day feeling drained, yet your body is still full of unused energy, like a hunting animal kept in a cage. So you lie down and your mind keeps running because the body never finished its work. Sleep becomes thin, fragmented, full of half dreams and shallow descents. Ancient tiredness had weight. It lived in the shoulders and calves. It pressed behind the eyes like gravity. It hurt. Didn't require a routine to activate. It arrived as consequence. This is the secret the modern world keeps trying to manufacture with supplements and screens and breathing techniques, the exhaustion advantage. The body sleeps deepest when it has been truly and consistently active in the way it evolved for. And the evidence isn't only poetic, it is written into bone. When archaeologists study skeletal remains from ancient populations, they often find bodies shaped by daily physical demand. Joint surfaces show wear patterns consistent with repetitive labour. Spines reflect the stress of lifting and carrying. Muscle attachment sites on bones can become more pronounced when a person has spent years doing hard work, hauling water, grinding grain, digging, rowing, building, farming, walking long distances. These aren't the marks of someone who worked out. These are the marks of someone whose survival depended on movement. The ancient body did not have a sedentary option. Even ordinary tasks were physical. Water wasn't a tap, it was a journey. Heat wasn't a switch, it was fuel gathered and tended. Food wasn't convenience, it was work. Planted, harvested, milled, carried, cooked, cleaned. Clothing wasn't an online order, it was washing and repairing and making. Transport was legs, commerce was walking, community was proximity, and labour shared. You didn't need a fitness plan because life was the plan. And the nervous system adapted to that reality. Because consistent movement doesn't just build muscles, it builds a daily rhythm the brain trusts. Activity in daylight, rest in darkness. Physical strain in the body, release in the night. That rhythm is a language the human organism understands without words. Deep sleep, especially the slow wave kind, is where the body repairs itself. Tissue rebuilding, immune calibration, hormonal restoration, memory consolidation in ways that are more physical than people realise. This stage of sleep isn't just nice to have, it's the body's emergency maintenance window. But the body doesn't enter that window as easily when it hasn't been physically taxed. It's not punishment, it's logic. Repair is prioritised when repair is needed. The ancient world created repair needs every day, and not in the neat, isolated way modern exercise does. Ancient exertion was constant, low to moderate, and woven through the entire day. The body didn't get 1 hour of controlled movement, and then 14 hours of stillness. It moved in countless small ways. Lifting, carrying, squatting, kneeling, climbing, balancing, walking uneven ground, shifting loads, reaching, twisting, bracing against wind, working through cold mornings and hot afternoons. It was varied, unpredictable, and full body. That variety matters. It tires the organism rather than just the muscle group. A modern gym session can be intense, but it's often narrow. You target, you isolate, you perform, then you return to a life designed to remove movement from every other hour. So the body gets a spike of exertion, then a long flat line. Many people assume the spike should be enough. But the nervous system isn't measuring minutes of effort the way a tracker does. It's measuring whether the day resembled the environment it was built for. A single workout inside a sedentary day can help, but it often doesn't recreate the ancient arc, and sometimes it backfires. Late intense exercise can keep the nervous system activated into the evening, raising temperature and stress chemistry when the body should be cooling down. Ancient exertion typically rose with the day and fell with it. Work often ended as light faded. The body's heat and alertness had time to taper. Sleep didn't begin from a sprint, it began from a slow descent. Modern life often does the opposite. You sit all day, then try to fix the damage at night with a burst of effort. Then stare into a bright screen. Then eat late. Then expect sleep to arrive like a trained animal. The nervous system doesn't obey that sequence. It remains on guard because the day never taught it how to end. Another difference is the outdoors. Ancient labour happened under the sky. Even in cities, much of life spilled outside. The eyes received strong natural light in the morning and throughout the day. The skin felt temperature shifts. The lungs tasted wind. The ears heard real soundscapes instead of constant artificial noise. These cues anchor circadian rhythm more effectively than any app, because they are the original signals the brain evolved to follow. Indoor modern work strips those signals away. You spend the day under lighting that barely changes. You move from home to car to office to store to home without ever receiving a true daytime imprint. Then at night, you blast bright light directly into your eyes. Your body can't tell where it is in the cycle, and a confused circadian system produces confused sleep, trouble falling asleep, trouble staying asleep, less deep sleep, more fragmented nights. Ancient people didn't have to strategize for circadian alignment. They lived in it. And here is a harsher truth. Modern exhaustion is often not the kind that produces rest. It's the kind that produces hypervigilance. Stress without physical discharge leaves the body feeling threatened. Your mind might be tired, but your nervous system is still braced. The heart doesn't fully slow. The breath stays shallow. Muscles hold tension like armor. You bring that armor into bed and wonder why sleep won't deepen. Physical labor, for all its hardship, often discharged stress through the body. It created a clean fatigue. It gave the nervous system a reason to stop scanning because the day's demands had been answered physically. The body could say without speech, "We did what we had to do," so the night could begin. This is why ancient sleep could feel heavier, more inevitable, more restorative when conditions allowed. Not because ancient life was easier, because it was not, but because ancient life gave the body the one thing it still expects: a day of real movement. If you want to understand what modern sedentary living does to sleep, imagine asking a working animal to lie down all night after spending the day in a stall. It might be exhausted in spirit, restless in mind, but its body will not sink the way it would after roaming. The organism doesn't just need rest, it needs completion. It needs the sense that the day's energy has been used for something real. And even when modern people exercise, the environment often cancels the benefit. Too little daylight, too much sitting, too much evening stimulation, too much late eating, too much stress carried like invisible weight. The workout becomes a bandage rather than a rhythm. Ancient people didn't patch their day with exercise. Their day was exercise, but more than that, it was purposeful exertion. Work tied to survival, to community, to tangible outcomes. Purpose changes fatigue. It makes tiredness feel safe. A body can rest more deeply when the mind believes the day mattered and ended properly. So what is the lesson for the modern insomniac? Not go lift heavy things until you collapse. The lesson is older and simpler. Rebuild daily movement so it is constant, varied, and aligned with daylight. Walk more than you think you need. Stand more. Carry things. Use stairs. Move outdoors early if you can. Let the body experience the sky. Let your exertion peak during the day and taper into evening. Make your tiredness honest instead of purely cognitive, because the ancient body didn't need convincing to sleep. It needed permission. And permission came naturally when the day had been lived in a way the body recognized. Night in the ancient world could be cruel, even when the house was quiet. You could do everything right. Finish your meal early. Let the fire sink to be your summer home. Embers. Lie down on wool and linen in a room that finally belongs to darkness. And still your mind might stay awake, listening for what it can't see. In a world where illness arrives without warning, where grief is common, where danger sometimes has claws, the nervous system doesn't surrender easily. Sleep, when it comes, is not merely rest. It is vulnerability. So the ancients learnt to invite it the way you invite a frightened animal. Slowly, gently, with familiar cues, with warmth, with rhythm, with trust. They built a pharmacy for the night. Not a pharmacy of sterile bottles and bright labels, but one of roots, flowers, resins and seeds, plants whose effects were noticed long before anyone could name the chemicals inside them. A tradition of observation carried across generations. A craft refined by healers who watched what calmed a racing heart, what loosened a clenched stomach, what softened the edge of grief enough for the body to descend. In the Greek world, sleep had a face and a lineage. Hypnos was sleep itself, Thanatos his brother. Death, close enough to touch, always reminding humans that the night is powerful. Morpheus was the shaper of dreams, the one who gave sleep its images. When a culture personifies sleep, it reveals something modern people often forget. Sleep isn't just a function, it's an encounter. That's why ancient sleep remedies rarely look like a modern knockout. They look like guidance. Think of chamomile, small pale blossoms that seem almost too gentle to matter. Yet for centuries, people steeped it after dusk, not because a study told them to, but because they felt what happened when the warmth hit the stomach and the fragrance rose into the nose. The body's edge softened, the jaw unclenched, the breath deepened. A mind that had been scanning finally stopped searching the dark for meaning. Chamomile didn't need to be dramatic, it needed to be consistent, and consistency is its own kind of medicine. Then, there is valerian. The root that smells like the earth has secrets. It is not the sort of plant you take because it tastes pleasant. It is the sort you take because you respect what it does. Ancient medical tradition preserved names like Hippocrates and Galen not just as symbols of authority, but as representatives of a long method. Observe the body, record patterns, use what works. Valerian's reputation as a calmer of agitation survived because people kept noticing the same result. A subtle quieting, a lessening of inner noise, a nervous system that could finally step down from its guard post. And then there is the poppy. The poppy is the reason ancient sleep medicine always carries a shadow. It is the plant that teaches you the difference between inviting sleep and overpowering it. Poppy sap can quiet pain and pull the mind into a heavy depth, and the ancients knew that. The evidence is woven into culture itself, into imagery, into stories, into the careful way strong sleep plants were handled, mixed and warned about. This wasn't casual. This was power. And ancient people respected power because they lived with consequences. They didn't treat sleep as a product you could demand at any dose. They understood that when you push the mind too far downward, you risk not only the quality of sleep, but the safety of the sleeper. The poppy taught them what modern pharmacies also know. Sedation is not the same thing as restoration. You can make someone unconscious and still fail to heal them. This is where the ancient approach starts to look strangely modern again. Because modern pharmaceutical sleep aids can be effective, sometimes necessary, sometimes life-saving in the short term, but they often come with a trade that ancient healers would have recognized in their own language. They can change the shape of the night. They can blunt dreaming. They can create a kind of sleep that feels more like enforced silence than natural descent. They can leave the mind waking with residue, fog, dependence, the uneasy sense that you slept yet didn't fully recover. Ancient plant remedies, at least the gentler ones used nightly in households, often aimed for something different. Not domination, cooperation, a nudge rather than a shove. They worked with the body's desire to sleep instead of replacing it with chemical command. And that difference matters because the architecture of sleep is delicate. Deep sleep, the heavy restorative portion, is where the body repairs. Dreaming sleep is where the mind processes and reorganizes the day's emotional weight. A remedy that knocks you out but flattens these rhythms can create the illusion of success while quietly stealing what sleep is meant to do. The ancients didn't use that modern vocabulary, but many of their practices show the intuition. Don't break the night. Guide it. And it wasn't only Greece and Rome. On the other side of the world, Chinese medical traditions developed their own language for insomnia, less about sleep disorders and more about imbalance. A restless mind was not just a problem to erase, it was a signal. The heart-spirit unsettled, the body's inward tide disturbed, so remedies often focused on calming, anchoring, nourishing, settling, using seeds and roots and barks in combinations refined over centuries. These traditions weren't built on one magic herb, they were built on formulas, timing, and the belief that sleep is the natural state when the system is supported. Again, support, not force. Across cultures, the same pattern appears. The plant is only part of the remedy. The ritual is the rest. A warm infusion in the hands after dusk, a familiar scent that becomes a cue, a repeated sequence that teaches the nervous system what is coming next. Wash, dim, drink, lie down. The mind stops improvising. It stops bracing. It starts recognizing the corridor into the night. And what the nervous system recognizes, it can enter without fear. This is why ancient sleep remedies often lived inside sacred behavior, not because the plants were mystical by themselves, but because human beings are meaning-making creatures. Your brain responds to expectation the way your body responds to warmth. When you believe something will help you sleep, when you've done it night after night and it has worked before, your breath changes. your muscles soften, your attention lowers, your vigilance drops. The plant doesn't have to be a hammer, it only has to be the key that turns the lock. Modern people call this placebo as if it means fake, but placebo is the mind participating in healing. Ancient medicine understood participation. It assumed it. It built around it. Even the settings mattered. Temples designed for healing sleep. Rooms prepared for dream incubation. Offerings, prayers, purification rituals. All of it created the same psychological condition modern insomniacs struggle to build. Safety. A sense that the night is not a threat to survive, but a place to be restored. And when the mind feels safe, the body stops resisting. This is why, in the modern world, people are returning to botanical sleep. Wisdom, not as a rejection of science, but as a hunger for gentleness, a desire for tools that soothe without overriding, a desire for nightly practices that feel like descending into darkness rather than being pushed into unconsciousness. It's also because modern life has created a new kind of insomnia, a restless mind inside an underused body, living in perpetual, artificial light, surrounded by speed and noise. Strong sedatives can suppress symptoms, but they don't always solve the deeper mismatch. Ancient-inspired remedies, herbal, ritualized, rhythmic, offer something else. A way to align the nervous system with night again. Not perfectly, not magically, but patiently. So the lesson of the ancient pharmacy is not, take this herb and you'll sleep. The ancients would laugh at that simplicity. Their lesson is darker and kinder. Sleep is a powerful state, and powerful states require preparation. The plant is a companion, not a commander. The ritual is the bridge. The belief is the softening. The body is the destination. Morpheus doesn't arrive on demand. He arrives when the world is dim enough, quiet enough, safe enough. And when your own inner guard finally believes it can step aside. The ancient healers understood that. They weren't trying to conquer the night. They were trying to make peace with it. The modern mind wants a single cure. One pill, one herb, one perfect trick. But the ancients would tell you sleep doesn't work like that. Sleep is not a lever you pull. It's a world you enter. And worlds require gates. Light is a gate. Food is a gate. Movement is a gate. Temperature is a gate. Meaning is a gate. When you rebuild those gates, you stop begging the night to take you. You start arriving at the threshold, already ready to cross. That's what the old remedies were really doing, making the crossing feel safe, familiar, and inevitable. So now the final question becomes simple and hard. What would it look like to rebuild a life that produces sleep? If you are reading this with tired eyes, if you are listening to this with a mind that won't stop moving, there is one truth you need to hear before anything else. Your body is not failing. Your body is remembering. It is remembering a world you no longer live in, a world where night was truly dark, where the day ended cleanly, where meals had boundaries, where movement was unavoidable, where sleep was not a performance but a consequence, a world where rest arrived because life itself pointed toward it. Not because people were wiser than you, but because the environment did the work your willpower is now trying to do alone. This is the ancient sleep paradox. The people who thought least about optimizing sleep may have slept best because their lives produced sleep without negotiation. They didn't track it, they didn't chase it, they didn't fear it the way modern people do. They didn't lie in bed calculating tomorrow. They simply entered the night the way you enter a familiar room. We have more comfort now than any era before us, but we have less rhythm. We have more light but less darkness. More privacy but less safety in the nervous system. More convenience but less physical completion. And so sleep becomes something we must manage, something we must win, something we must earn like a badge. That mindset alone can keep you awake, because sleep does not respond well to pressure. The harder you grip it, the more it slips. So reclaiming ancient sleep is not about becoming ancient. It is about restoring the conditions that your ancient nervous system still recognizes as permission to let go. It is about turning bedtime from a test into a descent. It is about building a day that naturally delivers you into night. Start with the oldest lever, light. Treat light like a drug, because for your brain it is. Morning light tells your body when day begins. Evening dimness tells it when day ends. and true darkness tells it the night has arrived for real. If your eyes are bathed in bright light late at night, your brain will keep producing daytime chemistry. It will keep you alert, tense, shallow. It will not allow the deep phases of sleep to take over easily because it thinks the world is still lit and therefore still active. You don't need perfection. You need direction. Make your evenings softer, fewer bright overhead lights, lower lamps, warmer light, less screen exposure close to the face. If you can't avoid screens, reduce brightness and keep them farther away. The goal isn't asceticism. The goal is a signal. The sun has set, so your body can begin shutting down. Then make your sleeping space a cave again. Darkness is not just nice. Darkness is biological instruction. Cover the small, glowing devices. Remove the artificial dawn leaking through windows. Let the room become truly night. When your eyes open at 2 a.m., you want your environment to say, still night, not good morning. The second lever is the ending of the day, food. In the ancient world, most people finished eating well before sleep because the world demanded it. That gap matters. When you eat late, your body stays metabolically active. Digestion raises heat. Heat disrupts deep sleep. Blood sugar rises and falls. The nervous system stays more alert. The body can't fully commit to repair while it's still processing fuel. So borrow the ancient advantage. Give your dinner an earlier boundary most nights. Not because late food is sinful, but because late food is information. It tells your body the day is still running. If you want a deeper night, stop feeding daylight into it. You don't need to live on ancient foods either, but you can choose the ancient logic. Simpler evening meals that settle rather than provoke. Foods that don't spike. Foods that don't inflame. Less sugar close to bedtime. Less heavy intensity at the last moment. More calm. And then there's the third lever, the one modern people keep underestimating. Movement. Not a single heroic workout. Not punishment, not a performance. The ancient sleep advantage came from constant, varied movement throughout the day, often outdoors, under real light and real weather. That kind of life builds honest sleep pressure. It creates the fatigue that makes deep sleep feel inevitable. It also anchors circadian rhythm through daylight exposure and temperature shifts, signals your indoor modern life often removes. So take the principle, not the hardship. Move more often. Walk more than you think you need. Stand, carry, climb, stretch, kneel. Small movements woven through hours, not just one block of exertion. If you can, get daylight early. Even a short exposure to morning brightness can reset your internal clock more than you expect. Let the body feel the day as day, so it can feel night as night. The fourth lever is your physical environment, what touches you while you sleep. Ancient bedding often used materials that breathed. Linen, wool, straw, skins, layers that regulated temperature rather than trapping it. Modern sleep surfaces can be wonderful, but they can also run too warm and too static. A body that overheats sleeps shallowly. A body that can cool sleeps deeper. So think like an ancient sleeper. Keep your sleeping space cooler. Use breathable fabrics. Choose bedding that wicks moisture instead of sealing it in. You are not building a luxury. You are building a stable microclimate where the body can drop temperature and stay there. And then comes the most important lever of all, the one no mattress or supplement can replace: how you think about sleep. Ancient cultures often treated sleep as meaningful, healing, sacred, tied to dreams, tied to restoration. Modern culture often treats sleep as a problem and the bed as a battlefield. You go to bed fearing tomorrow. You measure the night like a judge. You lie there thinking, if I don't sleep, I'm ruined. And your nervous system hears that as danger. Danger is the enemy of sleep. So the final reclamation is psychological. Stop turning sleep into a task you must achieve perfectly. Stop treating every wake-up as failure. If you wake in the night, do not immediately punish yourself with fear. Treat it as an ancient moment. Still night, still safe, still part of the human pattern. Keep the room dark. Keep your mind soft. Let the wakefulness be quiet instead of catastrophic. Many people don't realize that what keeps them awake isn't the waking itself, it's the panic that follows it. The ancients did not carry sleep performance anxiety the way we do. They had many fears, but not that one. They lived with rhythms that made wakefulness in the night less threatening. They didn't slam their minds into morning with bright screens. They didn't turn midnight into a second workday. They let the night remain night. And that, in the end, is what we have lost. A clean boundary between day and darkness. A slow descent. A world that supported sleep without requiring you to fight for it. Progress gave us light on demand, warmth on demand, food on demand, entertainment on demand. It also gave us a nervous system that never gets the message that the demands have ended. We live in permanent, almost daytime, and then we wonder why our brains won't go quiet. To reclaim ancient sleep is to rebuild the message. Darkness earlier, food earlier, movement daily, cooler nights, breathable materials, a ritual that signals descent, a story about sleep that is not violent. Because restorative sleep is not something you buy. It is not something you hack. It is not something you force. It is a state your body enters when the world tells it truthfully that it can. And your body still knows the way. It has always known the way. The path isn't hidden. It's simply buried under brightness, speed and noise. Strip those back even a little, and the ancient birthright returns. Not as nostalgia, as biology, as the night finally doing what it was made to do, take you quietly and give you back repaired. If this journey into ancient sleep made you see the night differently, don't let it end here. Subscribe to Viking Times for more immersive stories that uncover the hidden wisdom of the past, how our ancestors lived, endured, and rested in ways we've forgotten. And tell me in the comments, where in the world are you watching from today?